Welcome to Make Your Mark podcast, where guests share their experiences, insights, and tactics to help you accelerate your business. So building, scaling, and monetizing your business is made easier. And I will be your host, Kay Suthar. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Make Your Mark podcast. And I'm your host, Kay Suthar. Now, I'm super excited because this is just the beginning of your podcasting journey. And so, like I promised you, I'm going to be doing an episode every single week talking about an aspect of podcasting, both guesting and launching your own podcast. But the way we structured this is we're going to be starting with the very basic things first, because I want to take you on a journey and make sure that we all are on the same page and understand what the podcasting world is all about. And so some of the questions I've been getting are very basic, and that's where we're going to start today. And each week, as we release an episode, it's going to be a little bit more advanced, making sure that by the end of the 3 months, by the end of the season, that you know everything that needs to be known about podcasting. And so today, as I said, it's going to be very basic. And some of the questions I've been getting quite a lot. And these are the 3 questions that I'm going to be covering today. And first of all, some of you have been asking me, what is a podcast? Okay, now I notice some of you, it's probably shocking that people are still asking that, but at the same time, I'm not surprised because there is so much information out there that is actually overwhelming and can confuse people. Okay, and so because podcasting is evolving as well, it's becoming unclear on what a podcast actually is. So I'm going to be answering that question for all of those that are unsure about that. Now, the second question people are asking me is, where do you even go and listen to a podcast? Okay, now, again, there's so many different distribution channels that is becoming confusing to everybody. And if you're not in the whole podcasting world, it's going to be something that's going to be missed. Okay, now people know that they've been listened to, but people are unclear as to how you can even listen to them. Now, the third question I'm going to be answering is, when do people listen to podcasts? Okay, now people can listen to them anywhere, however they want. But again, people are unclear as to, why people would listen to a podcast, when they would listen to them, what they're actually getting out of it. And so I'm going to be answering that question too. And so just to begin with, the first question is, what is a podcast? Now, originally a podcast was brought about back in 2004 when a journalist actually created the word podcast. Okay, he actually took 2 words and combined them together, and that was iPod and broadcast, and put it together and created the word podcast. Okay, now you're probably thinking, wait, hold on a second, Kay. Did you say it was created back in 2004? Yeah, that's right. Podcasting has been around for a really long time, but people just didn't really know about it. And so in my experience, and like where I've been going to different events and meeting people, I've actually found out that in the very beginning stages of podcasting, right, way back when people didn't even know what a podcast was, there was about 20 people that actually were podcasting, right? In the entire world, 20 people. And I even asked them, like, how did you go about podcasting? Because you don't have all the resources that people have today. And they actually said to me that, Kay, we had to create all the platforms ourselves and do the coding. Oh my goodness, I was so shocked. It has become so easy for every single one of us, and there's no reason why we all shouldn't be podcasting in one shape or form, whether it be guesting or actually launching a podcast, because we have all the resources out there that people didn't have back then. We don't have to do the coding anymore, right? And so before, podcast was actually an audio file. And today it's actually evolved so much that it's not just audio, but it can actually be watched as well. And a lot of people do video podcasting, which is what we specialize in at makeyourmarkagency.com. We specialize in video podcasting. And so it gets distributed on YouTube. So people can go and watch it on YouTube as listen to it as a podcast as well. And so that brings me to the next question, and that is, where do people listen to podcasts? Now, podcasting has various different audio distributions that it can be listened to, but we're going to keep it basic, like I said. And so it depends on what device you have. And you're probably thinking, okay, what are you talking about? What do you mean, what device? So if you have an iOS, if you have an iPhone, or if you have an Android phone, right? Depending on what device you have, you can go and listen to a podcast on different platforms. Now, if you do have an iOS device, then most people go and listen to it on Apple Podcasts, right? There's several different podcasts on the distribution channel called Apple Podcasts, but you can only listen to it there if you have an Apple device, right? An iOS. Go and download that app and start listening to a podcast. Now, if you have an Android device, right? If it's a Samsung, Sony, whatever it is, if it's an Android, most people go and listen to a podcast using the platform called Spotify. Okay, it's called Spotify, guys. You probably have heard of it. And so you'll just go ahead and download that platform. Again, if you have an Android, you'll listen to it on Spotify. Now, so decide which one you want to actually listen to it on, right? Figure out what kind of device that you have, and then you can actually go and download those different apps completely free. So you go ahead and download them and you would create an account. Once you create an account, you can go ahead and listen to as many different podcasts as you like. There is no limitations to it whatsoever. And what you will find is that there's actually a lot of podcasts out there, right? There isn't a podcast out there that isn't around a specific topic, right? No matter what topic you want to listen to, what topic you are interested in, I guarantee you there is a podcast out there for you. Okay, so go ahead and just start investigating, taking a look, doing a bit of research in there, and you probably find a search field in there. You can put keywords in there to find particular podcasts around that particular area, but just start playing around with it. And the other thing I would love for you to start doing is, because you're new to this, right? Because you're just starting to get into the podcasting world, you're going to start listening to different podcasts, is being aware of the different podcasts that excites you, right? That you actually like listening to. Because as we go down this road and each week we're going to be learning a little bit more, you might get to a point where you're thinking, you know what, okay, I actually think I want to start a podcast. And so when you start listening to different podcasts and seeing their different patterns, their different styles, how they do it, and you start becoming aware of the podcasts that you like, right? The styles that you like, maybe some of the styles that you don't like and you would want to avoid, then you know that if and when you get to a point that you want to start your own podcast, they're probably the styles that you would like to embed into your own podcast. Okay, but we're not going to go deep into that right now. At this present time, I just want you to go ahead and download the platforms and start listening to podcasts. Okay, now the third question is, when do people actually listen to podcasts? Podcasting is so diverse, right? Like I said, a lot of people listen to it, but you can actually watch it on YouTube as well. And so one of the differences here is, when you're watching a video, you need to have your full attention to it. Okay, now there is a lot of people that are visual people and prefer watching videos rather than listening to it on an audio, right? Which is great, which means that you're going to be reaching a broader audience, okay? Because it's not just audio only. So by doing that, you are actually creating a broader audience, but you might be someone that's visual too. So you may want to go and watch an episode on YouTube rather than listening to it. Now, if you want to listen to a podcast, then go ahead and do that, because a lot of people do actually take in information by listening to audio. And when you're listening to an audio, it means it doesn't need your full attention, that you can be multitasking. And this is what a lot of people do. Right? People love learning through audio because they can multitask. And what that means is you could be walking the dog and listening to a podcast. You could be doing errands around the house and listen to a podcast. And one of the biggest things that people are doing right now is when they go to the gym and they're working out, they're listening to podcasts, right? Because you can multitask. And in fact, I go to a gym and I've been asking people there, you know, when you work out, what are you listening to? Are you listening to music? Are you listening to podcasts? What types? All these things. And most people actually said they're listening to a podcast. Right? And the reason for that is because they're learning whilst they're working out. Okay, and people are using podcasts as a form of learning different things, right? Not just being entertained, even though that is a big aspect of podcasting as well. People like to be entertained. And so there's a lot of comedy podcasts out there, crime podcasts, there's all sorts of podcasts. And so people are using it for education and people are using it to be entertained. Right? And you might have few separate ones where you're in the mood to be entertained. So you're going to be listening to a particular podcast, or if there's something that you want to learn about, whether that's marketing, social media, whatever it may be, then there's another lot of podcasts that you listen to, right, to learn that information. And so there's various different ways that you can actually listen to it, watch it, take it in, because podcasting has evolved so much. Okay, so just to wrap up, guys, as I said, what is a podcast? Originally, it was an audio file. Now it's evolved to video, and people use it to be educated and to be entertained with. And you can actually listen to it on the go. Okay, listen to it wherever you are, whatever you're doing, because it allows you to multitask at the same time. And where you can listen to it, like I said, remember there's 2 different main platforms. Whether you got an iOS or whether you have an Android, you want to make sure you download Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Now, there are various other different distribution channels, but we're not going to get into all of that right now. We're going to keep it very, very simple. So go ahead and download one of those platforms and start listening right now. Until next week, guys, I'll see you then. Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.